Hello and welcome to Release Day, the podcast series that dives into the stories and strategies of how Canada's music community are releasing their art to the world. I'm your host, Alex Heward. Today we revisit an interview I did in May of 2020 with Julian Taylor for our Release Day video series. Now, if you haven't heard it by now, Julian's latest solo record, The Ridge, is probably one of the greatest folk Americana records to be released during the year best known for the pandemic. It is just fantastic. Julian is of West Indian and Mohawk descent, first making his name as the frontman of Canadian rock band Staggered Crossing in the early 2000s. The Ridge was released on June 19th, also known as Black Independence Day or Juneteenth, and during a month that is also recognized as National Indigenous History Month here in Canada. We talk about the benefits of releasing this record independently and how Release Day has changed over the decades, along with his thoughts on how the music industry could evolve post-pandemic. But first, we acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Land acknowledgements mark a small and important step in the process of reconciliation and building a positive relationship with our country's Indigenous peoples. Be sure to stick around after the interview as Graham and I highlight some music industry news and share the artists we've had in rotation for the past week. The Ridge is a beautiful piece of historical reflection and of the present world around us, as well as admiration for the loved ones in Julian's life. It has been recognized worldwide, drawing well-deserved accolades for his music for the first time from countries in Europe, Australia, and Asia. And because we recorded this interview back in May of 2020, we didn't have a whole lot of metrics to hold his album to, but I can tell you just from Spotify alone, this album has been streamed over 2 million times. Incredible. Our conversation begins with Julian talking about the best time to release a project of this nature.
It's never the right time, and it's always the right time, to be honest with you. And if you have something in your heart and in your mind and in your soul that you need to sort of excavate and get out there, then that's usually my indication that it's time. I was supposed to release this record in September, but because I'm releasing it on my own, I was able to sort of expedite the whole process and get it out before then. This particular record is really close to the release of Avalanche, which was the Julian Taylor Band's last record. It seems like in the last few years I've put out a lot of material. Desert Star was a double record. Before that, Tech Noir, and then Avalanche, and now this. I just had so much music in me that I needed to flesh out, and particularly this project, The Ridge, is more of a folk singer-songwriter Americana sound, which I'm really a big fan of. And I think a lot of my music has reflected that style from the very beginning. If you listen to like early Staggered Crossing stuff, like the first record, I believe that it's still there, that Americana influence. And finally, this time I felt like I was ready to produce a record with my friend Som that would reflect my writing and really bring that to the forefront. Because I think that the other records, when I listen to them, the songs are there, but unless you sort of break it down to just an acoustic version, it gets lost behind a lot of production and the band itself, and all that stuff's well and good. I think it's awesome, but yeah. This one was a little bit more low-key. I felt like I was a bit tired of dancing all over the stage for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I needed just to calm down and sit on a stool for a second.
Can you take us through the album a little bit? Not that you need to dissect each song, but, from beginning to end, the kind of the message and the journey you take your listeners on?
Yeah, sure. There's 8 songs on the record, so it's on vinyl. With 2 sides, and then the record starts off with the title track, The Ridge, which takes me back to my childhood. And when I was very young, I went to visit my grandparents in Maple Ridge every summer and lived there on their sort of plot of land where they had horses and bred dogs. And all sorts of stuff like that, and had chickens and things like that. And it was a really wonderful upbringing. I was very lucky in that regard because my mom ended up being able to track my grandfather down. They had their family split, and my mom and her sisters and my grandmother, my maternal grandmother came to Toronto, and my grandfather and my step grandmother met in the middle of the country, and they went west, and nobody really heard of them until my mom was old enough to sort of track them down, and that's what she did. And luckily enough for me, my grandfather took a very big part of my life, and so did my step grandmother. And when my step grandmother died, I wrote this song. It was, it's kind of a strenuous circumstances to when that happened, when she passed, and it was almost as if I felt like my childhood had been sort of stripped away from me, and I had to find a way back to it. And that song was able to help me do that. When it comes to the record and a theme that, that has a thread throughout the whole thing, I think that the thread would be innocence. I think the thread would be a longing to fit in somewhere. I grew up as a West Indian Mohawk in a very predominantly white area. So I have really great friends that are, white and Indigenous and Black, but I always felt I didn't fit in anywhere in some sort of way. I mean, I've talked to my mom about this. She sort of understands, and my sister certainly does. And there are others like us that feel that way. So this record hones in on that if you can find it in the underlying stories, I don't come out and say it. Why would you do that? But,
yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it wraps up beautifully with your last song on the album. I think that really kind of brings the whole album and ties it all together, I think, to what it is you're speaking about.
Yeah, with the poem and whatnot. That poem I didn't write. My grandfather actually wrote it. I found that in his belongings when he passed. And so I was working on, lyrics for that song, and all of a sudden I just said, you know what? I'm just going to try to speak it.
I was pretty surprised, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I apologize if I didn't find this, but you don't have any, and I know you don't make albums for awards and accolades, you make it for yourself, but you've not been nominated for a Juno or won any Junos in the past?
No, I've never been nominated. People have asked me that before. I've been nominated for a folk music award for Indigenous Songwriter of the Year. I haven't won. I haven't won any awards other than when I was in Staggered Crossing. We won the Contemporary Recording of the Year for COCA, which was the Canadian Organization of Campus Activities. Mm-hmm. That's the only award that I've won officially. But no, I've been doing this for 25 years. I've never been nominated for a Juno.
Well, for what it's worth, coming from myself, I feel like you're probably onto something with this album, and I'd be surprised that if there wasn't some kind of a Juno nod with what you've written here and put out. So,
well, I appreciate that. If it comes, great. If it doesn't come, great. I mean, I'm kind of over it now.
Totally, yeah. No, and I know that's not what it's about. I was just listening to that. Human Race is just an absolutely beautiful song. And it just feels like something that should be recognized. But
well, you know what? I think that any one listen is a recognition of what I've done. I always look at it as one listener at a time. We have a joke, my bandmates and I, where when the award season comes out, that we've continued our streak. I'm not sure if there's a writer out there that has had as long a streak. I'd be curious to find out, and I'd love to have a laugh about it.
So yeah, you've been releasing music for I would said almost 2 decades, but I guess over 2 decades now.
Well, yeah, and I've been releasing music. The first EP for Staggered Crossing came out in 1997.
Wild. Can you?
Tell me about it.
Sorry.
Tell me about it. It's wild.
Yeah.
I don't know where all the time went.
Can you give some perspective on how release day has changed from back in 97 to releasing your full length in 2001 to releasing the Ridge now? How the feeling is, whether it's still the same, it changes. How has that release day changed for you over the last?
It's always exciting. I mean, the first EP we printed like 300 tapes, right? And so we were in high school at the time, and that was pretty exciting. We had a keg party in my parents' backyard. You could come in and you could buy a tape and get like two solo cups, and we thought that was pretty cool. My parents, I don't know how cool they thought it was, but because it got pretty messy. But that was my very first release day. We celebrated with a cassette tape, and people in high school really enjoyed that, and that made its way to a publisher who eventually signed us, and then because of that, I got signed to Warner Music, and they put out the first Staggered Crossing record, and bless everyone there for doing the job that they did, because it was a hard slog at that time. Napster had just hit full swing. I remember our record being bumped and then coming out the next winter, so we were kind of sitting on it for a while. I don't really know what was entailed in actually getting the actual record release, because I was so far removed from the behind the scenes part of it. All I know is that once that record was released, we were on a media blitz, especially here in Toronto, and we were fortunate to live in Toronto because we just got hauled everywhere, and it was a big thing to try to hawk this record. Not sure how many we sold, but it was a good run. We had a top 10 hit, and then after that, the release date changed because I ended up putting things out mostly independently. The last record was put out by Gypsy Soul. I've worked with Emporia Records as well, and they're really great people, and they put out Desert Star. From putting out things independently, I know how much work on the admin side it takes. Like right now, I have to go, if I choose to. I'm probably not going to do that today because the weather's so nice. But I'm supposed to register all the songs. I've registered most. I got to do it with CMMRA. I've got to do it with Actor Racks. I got to do it with Sound Exchange, Connect Music. Yeah, it's a lot of work. And then I have to upload the songs and get them out for the release date here in Canada, and in Europe. I'm going to release it in July. So that's a lot of work, and I personally don't like doing it, but the reward is a bit more. We're not talking like hundreds of thousands of dollars, but we're talking enough for, a Canadian musician who does this on his own to at least be like, okay, it's worthwhile me spending the time doing it. Absolutely. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't. Well, if I didn't, you give away percentages of things and stuff like that. And it's well and good. If I was in a position and I felt like my records were going to do really, 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 really well, and people also felt the same way, then I might be in a position to go, okay, yeah, sure, somebody else can do this, and I wouldn't worry about it as much as I do. But because I am an indie artist, and because I don't, my margins are really small financially, monetizing this stuff is not easy. Selling the stuff's not easy. When does a lot of the planning for that start when you do this independently? As soon as I get the final master. I work really heavily on the mixing side of things with producers and stuff like that. I don't do the mixing myself because I'm not good at it. I wouldn't do it. I can mix demos and things like that, but I'd never put anything that I mixed out there probably. But I do have... I'm really hands-on in every aspect of what's going on. Like it's almost as if I'm hypersensitive to everything that's happening. Maybe I'm a bit of a control freak. Don't mind it though. No, everybody else's problem, not mine. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, you've been around it long enough. I think you understand what kind of involvement you need to have in these processes. Well, if I want to make any money, look, I put out music for the goodness of the art form itself, and that need to do that and release what's in my heart and soul. That's number one. Number two, I still have to live on this earth and get by. I'm not really able to go and play a club and then give me a case of beer anymore. That happened when we were 20, and we thought that was amazing. Like, wow, we just got a case of beer. Yeah. Right. Okay. Back in the day, they give you a case of beer and then you'd finish it and you'd end up drinking at the bar and then they'd take it off your pay. Do you have any, I know there's a lot of standard artistic and creative collateral that come with
releasing music, do you have must-haves that come with every release?
Not really. I use a service called RDX Direct, which helps me get some of the music out there to radio. I also use I use DMDS, which is a service to get singles out there to commercial radio and press. Those particular services seem to always happen. I always use those. Certainly, I need a publicist. I've been, learning that a little bit more as things go around over time. I think I have a great team right now, especially on this Ridge record that I never had before. Internationally, especially. Most of the reviews for this record have come from international publications, like American Songwriter, which was really huge for me. I'd never been thought of in the same breath as those people, and I was very, very honored to be mentioned in that publication, as well as, Americana Music Association and Americana in the UK, Pop Matters. These publications are big. Even Glide magazine compared me to Bruce Springsteen, which was kind of crazy. I don't look like Bruce Springsteen.
I wasn't going to say anything.
Yeah, I look like Harrison Ford. What I would say. What celebrity do you look the most like? Harrison Ford.
You had to ask. What about music videos and album artwork? How do you, obviously the Ridge was different considering the circumstances. How do you go about sort of, considering your album artwork and music videos for what you've done?
I did the album artwork I usually use my friend Patrick Duffy at Attention Design. And again, I'm very hypersensitive to what comes through. I'm really hands-on there, and I sort of run him through the ringer a lot until I'm happy with things. And for the Ridge, I actually did the photography on the Ridge. I sort of moonlight as a photographer once in a while. I had one of my photos in the Maclean's Great Canadian Contest come number 3, which was kind of exciting. So I took the pictures, the front and back cover of the Ridge. Those are my shots.
How did you decide on the visuals for the Ridge? I guess the story tells itself.
It was quite obvious as to what needed to happen. We had gone through, a few examples that he had sent me, and nothing had stuck. Nothing really spoke to me until I went through a whole bunch of photos that I was trying to use to explain to him what I was looking for. And I thought, oh, wow, this is it. I mean, the pictures of the barn on the front cover of the Ridge is my great aunt's farm in Creemore. And then the back is the actual house.
Cool.
And then my Mustang, I think, was in the picture, but I think it got cropped out.
The your website, you put up all your music on your website for streaming before the release. I think that's a great tactic. How long have you been doing that? And have you seen any increase in sales or any increase in attention or awareness to the album once it's actually released? People
have been buying the record by pre-order. It's done okay. I can't complain. It's done better than any pre-order that I've ever, put out and released. I also think that that's probably because I took control of the website myself. I designed the website by myself and used Bandzoogle. I really enjoy being able to control the whole thing myself. And for the longest time, I was trying to, speak to people about what it was that I wanted to, visually what I wanted up there, what I wanted to have textually up there. And finally, I just decided to do it myself. So everything that you see on the website, everything I did on my own, and it has sort of generated a bit more interest. And I also wanted to make sure that people who might discover the Ridge were aware of the history of what I've done over the past, 2.5 decades. Even though I know people have heard my name, I'm not necessarily sure how many people have actually heard the work that I've done and really had much interest in honing in on the depth and creativity that I've put out in the last, 2 decades. I've had this, and it could be me thinking this. I mean, it could be all me thinking that people heard Staggered Crossing and had something in their mind as to what that was. And when Julian Taylor Band came, it was really hard to get people to even think of me in a way. I mean, that wasn't Staggered Crossing. Oh yeah, the guy from Staggered Crossing. Oh yeah, we know what he sounds like. We've heard him before. We've seen him before. It's almost as if when you've been discovered that there's no new discovery to be made, which is completely untrue. I mean, people grow, people change, and certainly I've kept at this long enough to warrant a listen or two, and to just, objectively that is,
It kind of leads into my next question. I mean, through these groups, I mean, I know you've mentioned that it kind of all the sound and a lot of what you have released in the Ridge has evolved through, the music in Staggered Crossing to the Julian Taylor band till now. But at the same time, it's kind of been labeled pop, it's been labeled R&B and soul, and now you're here at the roots rock Americana genre. Can you identify almost what ultimately landed you here?
Not really. I mean, it's all rock and roll to me. I didn't set out to make a roots record. I set out to make a record of songs I'd written, which is always what I've done. I never went out and set out to make a pop record or a rock record. I've never done that. I've actually never sat down with a producer or people that I'm working with in the band, or say the label, really, because I haven't really had very many labels. Aporia's one label, and I guess Warner Music would be the other that I had really close sort of ties with, and the only ones that I would have had any sort of creative conversations with. By the time Gypsy Soul put out Avalanche, it was done. But as far as the conversation's ever gone, I love Americana music. I mean, my favorite artists are part of that. I love the band. And I think the band is very similar to, Le Chic. I don't know. They don't sound the same, but sentiment's the same. Just like, I don't really hear the difference between Steve Earle and the Ramones. I get that the instrumentation's different, but I don't really hear the difference. One of my favorite bands is Little Feat, and I can listen to Little Feat all day long. Nobody seems to know what they are. Are they a jam band? I don't know. Are they a country band? Sometimes. Are they a soul band? Yeah, once in a while. Do they funk out? Yeah. Nobody seems to know what Little Feat is. But in my personal opinion, they might be the greatest band ever. And then the Stones, look at the Stones. When even going through my favorite record, Exile on Main Street, you hear rock and roll, you hear blues, you hear country, you hear gospel. And I don't understand why they can get away with it. And everybody's like, oh, that's rock and roll. But as soon as I do something, it has to be labeled in some sort of thing. I've never understood that. I mean, I listen to a lot of groups. And unfortunately, when people have done that to me, I often wonder if it's because of the tone of my skin. I don't want to think that, because people say, "Oh, you're crazy," but I'm like, some of my friends who are black, and like if you weren't, you'd be a lot bigger than you actually are. And I was like, "Are you sure that's the truth?" And I don't think so, but it does come into conversation because we're paranoid. We have every right to be paranoid. History dictates that we have a right to be a tiny bit paranoid, but I don't believe that. I just think that it's all rock and roll to me. I didn't set out to do anything differently. I write songs on an acoustic guitar and on a piano, and the song dictates where to go. And what I've gotten better at, I think, over the years is grouping a bunch of the songs that might sound similar together. Whereas, like, in Desert Star, none of them do. Sorry, that was a very long-winded answer.
I loved it, because I think every artist and every band needs to hear that. I think a lot of musicians have heard this. You have to be identified, because there's so much music out there. You have to be identified as this genre, and you need to be able to compare yourself to this, that, and another person. So that way, you can, before being listened to, you can be identified. They know what they're going to hear based on what they read about you.
It's kind of strange to me, but I get it.
Yeah, no, I get it as well. But again, I feel like a lot of those things take away from why they're actually trying to make music. I mean, it's always been for me, just make music, do it because you love to do it. Stop doing it to try and be recognized by a label, or, if that's the case, they're going to come to you because they see and they hear what they want to sell. And if that's your ultimate goal, go for it. Otherwise, just keep doing it because you want to do it. episode 2 of our release day series, we featured Jordan Paul, and he was a 2015 recipient of the Shine Bursary. You know, I know you have a close connection with the Bruce Adamson Bursary. So I'd like to, you know, hear from you how this fund is providing the musicians with assistance they need, and the necessity of organizations like Canada Helps and Unison, that they exist for the music community.
Well, I'm a supporter of Unison Benevolent, and whenever I get a chance, if I can and when I can, I donate there. Also, I was one to start the Bruce Adamson Bursary. Bruce was the guitar player in Staggered Crossing. His life was ended short, so I wanted to do something to honor his memory, to show his children how important his musical contribution was to this community and to my life. This is the first year of the Bruce Adamson Shine Bursary Fund, and that is to help, you know, at-risk children who are interested in pursuing music with a bit of money to help them with, say, lessons or education primarily. I guess it could also go towards equipment. It can go to whatever they want, just to keep them going. And a lot of the time, it's not necessarily about money that people really, really need in the early goings of this sort of ordeal. Mostly it's like a vote of confidence is actually a really big thing, you know? It really speaks volumes. And when people have given me a vote of confidence, it's given me the strength to keep going and feel, you know, not necessarily validated, but valued. And I think that when people feel valued, they dig deeper within themselves to keep going. And I think that our society is tricky that way. I mean, we do celebrate a lot of stuff that we shouldn't celebrate, and we don't celebrate enough stuff that we should. And people's efforts, you know, and their passion for something that really, really drives them and heals them and has the capacity to heal others, like music, rather than fame, is something that I'm certainly more than willing to add my contribution and support behind. And Bruce was the same. You know, Bruce was a huge supporter of mine and my songwriting, and early on gave me that vote of confidence that I needed to keep going. He was a killer guitar player, and I've never seen anybody that good. Proceeds from the Ridge will go towards that fund, so that in turn will help other people.
Yeah, that's great. Feels like, you know, even, you know, back in, you know, 2000 or 2007, and you know, Staggered Crossing was involved with, you know, amending the Bankruptcy Act for the copyright.
That was pretty amazing, eh?
Yeah, and I think it just is something that artists should consider, is just how can they be involved in the industry from that kind of perspective. I mean, you have Miranda Mulholland playing on the Ridge. She's one of the largest advocates for musicians, and I think artists need to look at how they can be more involved in their community. And from very, very beginning, you've been that kind of a person.
I thank you. I appreciate that. It's important to me.
I'll just finish up here. It's not a fun subject, but I just wanted to touch on the pandemic and, you know, how it's had an effect on yourself from a business point of view, and how you feel it's had an effect on the music industry and the future of the music industry. Wow.
Well, it's had a huge effect on the music industry, as everyone knows. It's on the verge of, you know, collapse. From a live music standpoint and everybody involved in that sector, it looks pretty grim right now. I don't know. I can't really answer that question to what I believe will happen and how that will be, you know, fixed. I don't know. That's tricky. I worry about it. I worry about the whole pandemic in you know, in Ontario, where we are, I mean, the numbers are going up. They've tried to do stage one. When this all happened, it was so surreal. For me, it's affected me certainly on a mental. It's hard. This has been tough. I mean, homeschooling, being a parent, working, and trying to get this, like, all of these things, all of the compound pressures of being everything all the time, all day long is a lot, because we used to have sort of a little bit of a break. And I think that the weather has been horrendous here in Ontario, which is not a bad thing for keeping everybody inside, but holy smokes, for your mental health, it hasn't been good. And I've always said that, you know, I certainly and truly believe that we all suffer from varying degrees of mental health. Some, you know, have a little bit worse than others. This one's been tough on me and my family. I'm sure it's been tough on a lot of people. From a musical standpoint and business-wise, it's been okay. I've been lucky to score some pretty cool things. Like I was able to, I was invited to do the Music Together, you know, Ontario Live Presents with Arts and Crafts and Slate Music and Shopify and all those folks. And then the NAC Canada Performs. I was also accepted and asked to perform one of those on a live stream, and that's Sirius XM and Slate Music again and Facebook, and you know, really cool that those people have put those initiatives together. And I've been very fortunate to be able to benefit from their, you know, forward thinking and action. It looks like, you know, when Napster came around and everything on the, you know, distribution side of things changed, we might be headed for something like that. I don't know. Like, it's all hearsay on my part because I don't know. I know that somebody asked me about my inability to play live, and I thought about that question, and I thought, you know what? I haven't lost my ability to play live. I still can. I just can't do it in front of people.
Yeah.
But I thought about it for a second. That gave me a bit of solace. I'm like, you know what? I can still play, you know, and there will come a day that I get to play in front of people again. I don't know what else is going on around the world, but we're very lucky in Canada that the music industry rallies around itself and the people in it the way that it has during COVID. It's brought a lot of unity.
What a positive life force in this world right now, and it was so amazing to be able to speak with Julian. I got to be honest, I was a bit starstruck when I heard back from him that he was agreeing to do an episode of Release Day for us just after his rich history in the music industry. And man, just so incredible to be able to speak with him. And by the way, he was sitting on his front porch. I don't know if you could tell, but he was sitting on his front porch for this entire interview. And it was just such an amazing environment. Usually it's nice to have them in front of a microphone and mic'd up, but there were kids running by saying, "Hi, Julian." And it's just a beautiful atmosphere to have had this conversation. Graham, welcome to the show, my friend. What are some of your takeaways from my conversation with Julian Taylor?
In every single episode, I think we've been hearing the same, what I would call three things come up. Number one being radio, number two being the team, and number three being funding of some sort for these kind of projects. So, you know, radio's still not dead. That hasn't changed since May 2020 to now. And like I think our last couple weeks, people have talked about radio and just how important it is. Julian talks about the team and like working with his PR and his publicist and just having trust in them. And, you know, you see how trusting your PR team and your representation gets you all the way around the world, right? Like he said that this was the first time he's had recognition in Europe. And I want to go back to the first thing that Julian said to you in this interview. And it was, there's no right time to release music. You know, I think that that's kind of a really powerful quote from him. And it's basically saying like, you know, if you feel like you have a voice and your voice has something to say, then you just got to put it out there. Because you could spend, 20 years perfecting one little guitar part, but no one's going to hear that if you spend 20 years in your basement just working on that one thing.
Graham, thanks a lot, man. I really appreciate your takeaways on that one. One thing to highlight in the news, Indie Week has just announced Indie 101 their dates and their super early bird tickets. April 20th to 24th, Indie 101 is focused on education for artists and emerging music businesses, covering everything from music creation, production, distribution, publishing, rights and royalties, marketing and exporting your music and career. Top music industry professionals will share their insights on how to navigate the business and come out on the other side successfully. Graham, who have you been listening to this week, man? What are the music picks?
This week, it got weird. I feel like I say that every week, but this week it definitely got weird. So the first band and the first song that I've listened to this week is the band is called Black Dresses, based out of Toronto, and the song is called Zero Ultra, which was released February 2021, or February 12th, 2021.
Does this have to do with an anime comic book?
No, this one doesn't.
Sounds like it.
It does. It really does. But yeah, this is just, a great song. They released a full album, and all of it is just, you talk about finding your voice. It's like these people have found their voice. And you can tell, because each song is just so strong all on its own. But then you put it together in an album, and it's a great sort of list. It's a great listen. It's a great experience. And it's definitely, it can be a bit of a wild ride at times. And then another album that came out was Matt Mays, and he put out From the Burnside with Love. It's a live album. Came out again February 12th, 2021. And I picked the song Cocaine Cowgirl because it's a great song. And I don't know, there's something about live albums. They come out and you just can't get enough of them because it's so cool to feel the energy. And then I just listened to the Rick White archive, and he basically reproduced Sloan's Peppermint EP. And the way that it started is he found a recording of him reproducing it when he was in when I think it was the 90s, and he had a cassette of him doing this project and stuff. Or it might have been early 2000s, but then he went back and very recently redid it all. So he did the entire Peppermint EP. I picked Pretty Voice because it's a great song. And again, released February 12th, 2021. But yeah, that's kind of cool that, spend the time to just basically cover a whole EP from someone. I think that it's really cool. And I think that, it's a great way to learn, be okay, how did they get certain, tones? How did they make stuff work? How did they mix it? Right? It's a very analog way for you to be did I do it right? Or does it sound completely different? Right? And nowadays with the internet and stuff, you can find about what gear people are using in the studio and what mics they used. So I think it's pretty cool that you could, basically recreate an entire album just by yourself in your bedroom almost. So that's who I listened to this week. Who do you listen to?
Well, on February 12th, the brilliant Havaya Mighty released her song Obia, which was she's just fantastic at making hip hop music. I love her stuff. She's released a few singles over the last few months, and just a force in the Canadian hip hop world, man. This is so great. And she does this music with her family. The song was produced alongside her brother, Mighty Prince, and it's centered around Havaya's Caribbean heritage and focuses on trust, spirituality, her close connection to family, and a belief that the energies around you dictate what you allow in your life in order to prosper. And it's really evident in the music video that they do, obviously in the lyrics as well, but there's a really cool music video that was done as well. So Obia by Havaya Mighty. Another project I was listening to is called Black Alliance Volume 1 that came out January 29th. And this is a Warner Music Canada project. It's a roster of black artists covering beloved songs from legendary black artists who have paved the way for artists of today. It recognizes the significance of Hayden Neal, who was the lead singer of Jack Soul, and he unfortunately passed away in November of 2009. But it's just a really cool project, and there's an artist on here, Just John, and I interviewed him in 2014, I believe, while I was doing another documentary series that we had created called The Northern Hustle. And man, he was just a great kid, loved performing. He had a great show, and he's been doing it ever since. And I believe he's sold out the Mod Club. Rest in peace to the Mod Club. That venue is no longer standing, but man, he has been doing so many great things since I met him back in 2013, 2014. And it's really cool to see him on this album. He does a cover of My Struggles by Missy Elliott. So check that out. Black Alliance, Volume 1, and Just John's song, My Struggles. And lastly, I had to put a Julian Taylor song on this list because it is his episode, and I just wanted to highlight my favorite song from the album, and it's Human Race. Again, this album came out June 19th of 2020, so that is my favorite pick from the album. And yeah, you can go listen to all of these tracks today on our Spotify playlist, because we have created a playlist that houses all of our favorite picks, and it'll hold up to 50 songs. So once we get through 50 selections here, there's already songs on there from previous Release Day video series guests, and anytime new music comes up on Fridays, we try and update it with some new stuff there. But it will only ever have 50 songs on it, but there will always be our musical selections on there for you to find.
So definitely give us a follow on Spotify, where you're going to have that playlist that gets updated every week. And you can check us out on Instagram at releaseday_series. On Facebook, you can just search Release Day Series. And on Twitter, at releaseday SRS. And if that's not enough for you, we house everything on our website, releasedayseries.com.
Lastly, if you enjoyed what you heard, it would be great if you could share the podcast, leave us a lovely 5-star rating along with a positive comment to help spread the word, not only about us, but these fantastic musicians. That would mean a lot. If you're looking for more information about some of the stories and news headlines and songs we've mentioned, look no further than our show notes. And remember, if you have music you want to share, please feel free to send us your EPK to contactreleaseday@gmail.com. Okay, that's it. Thank you so much for listening to this episode with Julian Taylor. On next week's episode, we've got Don Levendier of the Motor League. I'm Alex Heward.
I'm Greg Beery.
Thank you so much for listening.
The crowd goes wild.
All right, finally. That was still half an hour. Okay, here we go.